Okay, we just started. So I'm gonna put everyone on mute. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So today we're gonna start Surah 19, verse 94 onwards. So I'll seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Surah 19, verse 94. He has encompassed them, and he has counted them one by one. All of them will come before him on the day of resurrection as individuals. Surely those who believe and lead a righteous life, the most gracious, will shower them with love. We made this Quran elucidated in your tongue in order to deliver good news to the righteous and to warn with it the opponents. Many a generation before them we annihilated. Can you perceive any of them or hear from them any sound? So, God willing, I'm going to stop here. And these verses are talking about people. You know, every God says every single one of them in the heavens and the earth is a servant of the most gracious. You know, everyone is a submitter to God, either willingly or unwillingly. You know, because everything is in accordance with God's will. You know, even though the disbelievers, think that they are not obeying God and they can do what they want. I mean, everything that's happening in their life is in accordance with God's will. You know, their health, wealth, happiness, everything is controlled by God, and every single atom in the universe is being controlled by God, and God encompasses all of them, and He has counted them all one by one. And all of them we will all go back to God, obviously, and we will have to appear before God on the day of resurrection. I mean, think about, like, if you one day you have to have a hearing and you have to go and see the judge, and it's kind of like that. But the fact is that they don't fear God or believe in the day of resurrection, so they're unaware of it. Mm, I really like verse 96 because God says that surely those who believe and lead a righteous life, the most gracious will shower them with love. You know, and this is God's promise. God's love obviously is this is about God's love, and subhanallah, I mean, God's love is better than anything that we know, and He controls, you know, all. I mean, He created love, right? So everything that uh, all these blessings that come through us, are part of God's love to us. His mercy, and because of that, I mean, of course, God doesn't love everyone. When you see people, they say God loves everyone. Jesus loves everyone, but God's love obviously is for specifically reserved for those who believe and lead a righteous life. And it's God's promise that He will shower these people with love, and when you're showered by God's love, you'll have a perfect life now and forever, and you will have no emptiness in your life. Um, I mean, yeah, it could mean a lot more to a lot of people, and Masha, that's one of those verses that you can reflect on. And subhanallah, it's also one of God's mercy that He has made the Quran elucidated in our tongue, made it easy for us to understand, to give good news to the believers and to warn the opponents. And I mean, God is reminding us that so many people, so many generations before us, God has annihilated because of their disbelief, and they're gone. So what do these people think will happen to them? Same thing. Uh, Anyways, uh, God willing, I'm going to go to Surah 20. Uh, TH, Taha, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. TH, we did not reveal the Quran to cause you any hardship. Footnote 421 says, uh, the role of these Quranic initials as components of the Quran's awesome mathematical miracle is given in detail in Appendix 1. So, uh, so we did not reveal the Quran to you to cause you any hardship, only to remind the reverent. A revelation from the Creator of the heavens and the high, from the Creator of the earth and the high heavens. The most gracious, He has assumed all authority. To Him belongs everything in the heavens and the earth, and everything between them and everything beneath the ground. Whether you declare your convictions or not, He knows the secret and what is even more hidden. God, there is no other God besides Him. To Him belong the most beautiful names. Have you noted the history of Moses? Uh, okay, actually, I'm gonna stop here quickly, and I mean these verses are interesting because you know God is letting us know that the Quran is a blessing for us and a mercy for us, and is there to help us make our lives easier, not to make them difficult. Satan wants to make the religion difficult for people, and we've all seen that with all the religious innovations and prohibitions and dietary regulations and so many man-made laws that people have put in place. But God's religion uh, is in the Quran, and everything that God has put in the Quran is there to make our life simpler and easier and happier. And we see that it's a reminder for the reverent, people who are reverently conscious of meeting God on the day of judgment. It's a reminder for them, to remind us that remind us what this life is about, and how to be successful. That we should all worship God alone and fix all the wrongdoings in our life so we can meet with God. Um, and it's a revelation from the Creator of the earth and the high heavens. It says, the most gracious, He has assumed all authority. Again, this is bringing us to the fact that God is running everything, and God controls everything. You to Him belongs everything in the heavens and the earth, and everything between them and everything beneath the ground. So there's nothing that doesn't belong to God. Basically, everything is in accordance with God's will, and and this should also remind us that when things happen in our lives that are you know uh, seemingly good or bad, it all happens in accordance with God's will. So we shouldn't turn into objectors, and we should try to cheerily submit, because God is the one who's running everything, and it's in accordance with God's will, and we just do our part by submitting to God. I mean, sometimes it could be difficult, but obviously like with anything else, it comes with its reward, and we have to try to submit as much as possible for our own happiness. Um, and whether you declare your convictions or not, He knows the secret and what is even more hidden. So God knows our innermost thoughts and things that are even more hidden that we don't even know. Like for for example, see someone goes to um, a um, a doctor, or not a doctor, let's say, you go to like psychologist, and he analyzes all your thoughts, and everything. He talks to you for hours, and he might like give you like um something about you that you probably are, but you probably already know. But if you think about God, I mean, He created you, right? So He knows your subconscious, and he knows everything, even like beyond that probably nobody knows besides God. I mean, that includes, and it's for everyone. That's a lot of information that God has of us, from start to end, that even the hereafter. So God's knowledge encompasses everything, and that's how great God is. And obviously, mashallah, verse 8 is also very beautiful. God, there's no other God besides Him. So again, we're being reminded to worship God alone. And it says, to Him belong the most beautiful names. So all the beautiful names that you can think of, God says they belong to Him because God is the creator of everything, and everything great comes from God. So any beautiful name you can think of, whether you find it in the Quran or not, you know, it belongs to God, because to God belongs all the beautiful names, the most beautiful names. Um, and we should use those names to commemorate God, and those attributes actually help us know God and understand God, and we can use them to come closer to God. So, God willing, I'll continue reading on the story of Moses, verse 9. Have you noted the history of Moses? When he saw a fire, he said to his family, "Stay here. I have seen a fire. Maybe I can bring you some of it, or find some guidance at the fire." When he came to it, he was called, "O Moses, I am your Lord. Remove your sandals. You're in the sacred valley, Tawa. I have chosen you, so listen to what is being revealed. I am God. There is no other God beside me. You shall worship me alone, and observe the contact prayer salat to remember me. End of the world is not hidden. The hour end of the world is surely coming. I will keep it almost hidden, for each soul must be paid for its works. Do not be diverted therefrom by those who do not believe in it, those who pursue their own opinions, lest you fall. So, these verses explain the history of Moses. Quran goes into great detail to describe the history of Moses, to confirm everything that we need to know about Moses and his story from the Old Testament. And one of the things we see here is um, it mentions in verse 14 that you shall worship me alone and reserve the contact prayer salah to remember me. Of course, and if you read the Torah, you will not find anything about the contact prayers. But here, God confirms that God gave them the contact prayers too. They were doing the contact prayers because they were followers of Abraham. Um, and so, this is again my opportunity to remind people that, if you're looking for practices that these people did of submission, you will not find them in the Bible. Uh, none of the religious practices of submission are actually practical scripture. Part of the practical scripture of Abraham is actually mentioned in the Bible. It's corrupted. Uh, and so but you can find it confirmed in the Quran, mashallah. But the story of Moses is very interesting because Moses had no clue, and he just saw a fire, and he told his family he's gonna see if he can get some information over there, or maybe some warmth. And he was uh, he was he received the surprise of his life when God actually spoke to him. God chose Moses to actually talk to him, and he heard the voice. uh, God called him saying, "Oh Moses, I'm your Lord. Remove your sandals. You're in the sacred valley of Tawa." And so we see that removing his sandals was a sign of respect because he was in the sacred valley, of thawab. So that's also explains like when we do our contact prayers, salah, we're talking to God, we're in direct contact with God. So out of respect, of course, as we've seen from generation to generation, we take off our sandals or shoes or whatever it is you're wearing when you do your contact prayers. Obviously, if you're forced by some circumstance, let's say a very unusual circumstance where it's impossible for you to take off your shoes, like say you're in a plane or something, then God understands. But other than that, I mean, if you don't have any excuse, solid reason, like where you're forced by circumstance, you you take off your sandals or shoes to do your contact prayers. Anyways, so God chose Moses, and that's why he spoke to him. Um, and God says in verse 15 also that the end of the world is not hidden. God says, I will keep it almost hidden. So it's almost hidden because for the disbelievers, it will come suddenly and they will be shocked. But for the believers, we already know it's coming, and when it's going to happen. It's going to happen in 2280 AD, and you can read more about it. Uh, it's given in the Quran. It says a footnote for 2015 says the end of the world is given in the Quran, God's final message, 1587. And so if you look at 1587, 1587 says, we have given you the seven pairs and the great Quran. And if you go to uh, appendix, I believe this is end of the world, appendix 25. I have it here on page 466. You can see how that's calculated because it's based on the geometrical value of all the initials that are mentioned in the Quran. And you can read more about it there, God willing. But it's telling us that, this is God's system. He's going to keep it almost hidden, even though, we know when it's coming, it's still kind of hidden because, you do not see any signs of it anywhere. And it's easy to be diverted from it, once you start mixing up your priorities, your if people start doubting and stuff like that. Obviously, they pursue their own opinions, they're going to get diverted from it. Okay, verse 17. What is this in your right hand, Moses? He said, this is my staff. I lean on it, herd my sheep with it, and I use it for other purposes. He said, throw it down, Moses. He threw it down, whereupon it turned into a moving serpent. He said, pick it up, do not be afraid. We will return it to its original state. And hold your hand under your wing. It will come out white without a blemish. Another proof. We thus show you some of our great portents. Go to Pharaoh, for he has transgressed. He said, my Lord, cool my temper, and make this matter easy for me, and untie a knot from my tongue, so they can understand my speech. And appoint an assistant for me from my family, my brother Aaron. Strengthen me with him, let him be my partner in this matter, that we may glorify you frequently, and commemorate you frequently. You are seer of us. He said, your request is granted, O Moses. We have blessed you another time, when we revealed to your mother what we revealed, saying, throw him into the box, then throw him into the river. The river will throw him onto the shore, to be picked up by an enemy of mine and an enemy of his. I showered you with love from me, and I had you made before my watchful eye. Your sister walked to them and said, I can tell you about a nursing mother who can take good care of him. We thus returned you to your mother, that she may be happy and stop worrying. And when you killed a person, we saved you from the grievous consequences. Indeed, we tested you thoroughly. You stayed years with the people of Midian, and now you have come back in accordance with a precise plan. I have made you just for me. Go with your brother, supported by my signs, and do not waver in remembering me. Go to Pharaoh, for he transgressed. Speak to him nicely. He may take heed or become reverent. They said, Our Lord, we fear lest he may attack us or transgress. He said, Do not be afraid, for I will be with you, listening and watching. Go to him and say, We are two messengers from your Lord. Let the children of Israel go. You must refrain from persecuting them. We bring a sign from your Lord, and peace is the lot of those who heed the guidance. We then we have been inspired that the retribution will inevitably afflict those who disbelieve and turn away. Okay, so God willing, I will stop here. So just going back to the story of Moses, I mean, uh, it starts with Moses' staff. God starts to show Moses the miracles that God has given him, and I mean, it shows that it really took him by surprise. Obviously, he started to become fearful, uh, and this was a staff that he had been using for a long time, and he used to herd his sheep with it and use it for other purposes. And now God turned it into a snake, a moving, live snake, serpent, which would be quite scary if it ever happened to any one of us. But you can imagine that. And subhanAllah, this surah is initialed with TH. So we know that this is the unaltered word of God, So it's for us, it's almost like, as this is happening, that we're seeing these miracles again. And it increases our responsibility too. Of course, the story of Moses is, subhanAllah, uh, very interesting, inspiring, and even entertaining at the same time, mashallah. And you have a lot of lessons to learn from in this story of Moses. Obviously, these are lessons for us, and this is why God made their history a lesson for us, so we can learn from it. And so one of them was the serpent, the staff turning into a serpent. Then his hand, if he put it under his wings, they would come out white without any kind of blemish. Um, and that was another proof. And all this was to show to Pharaoh that he was a messenger of God, and he was required to submit to God and let the children of Israel go. And here we see that Moses asked God for certain things when God gave him the mission, and one of them was to. There's two things here. One of them was to untie a knot from my tongue. Make this matter easy for me. Untie a knot from my tongue so they can understand my speech, and appoint an assistant from my family for my family, my brother Aaron. Strengthen me with him, let him be my partner in this matter, that we may glorify you frequently and commemorate you. You're the seer of us. Now it says in verse 36, your request is granted, O Moses, right? So you would think that his speech was also fixed and God gave him his brother Aaron, but we see that it was just God gave him his brother Aaron to help him, but his speech impediment was not fixed. And one of the proofs for that is when he spoke to Moses later on. Moses said, Pharaoh said, when he spoke to Pharaoh later on, Pharaoh said, who's better, me or the one who's lowly and can hardly speak, right? So that shows that when he actually went to Moses, he still had the same problem. And then one of the explanations Like I see it as an explanation. If you read the Eternity script by Messenger of the Covenant, you can see that all all the dialogues that are put in for Moses, they are in uh, this speech that looks like he has a problem talking. So actually, I might see if I can read part of it. It's actually interesting. Uh, so, okay. Okay, so I'm gonna read this from the script for eternity. Okay, it says, please, Moses, please fix my speech defect, my Lord. I would be more effective messenger if I can talk better. And then it's God's voice saying, I can fix your speech right this second, Moses, but it is not to be. I deliberately impart some kind of a superficial defect upon each one of my messengers. I want my creatures to come to me, not because of your eloquence or charisma, but because they recognize me as an absolute sovereign of the universe. Um, and yeah, so I'm just going to leave it at that. And then, uh, God, is telling us about, God tells Moses about his life, when he was very young and how God had planned his whole life, you know. I mean, it is really amazing to think about this, like, you come before God and then God tells you, I had this plan, this plan, this plan, this plan for you, for this to happen right now. It was all planned out for you to be here right this time. And, I have a mission for you and everything. And it's, subhanAllah, that's really amazing. But, this shows that God has planned each one of our lives really the way everything happens, and he knows all our lives like that, just like he's authoritatively informing Moses about everything and how he controlled each and every circumstance in his life for things to happen where they are. He inspired his mother for this plan to happen. He inspired his mother, put enough strength in her heart so she could, throw him into the box. The box would throw him onto the shore and the enemy will pick him up. All of that was planned by God. And the enemy, when he picked him up, obviously, he thought he was making the decision to, um, you know, uh, to, do whatever he wanted to. And but this was all, being controlled and planned by God. And and then it says, I showered you with love for me, and I had you made before my watchful eye. And so, this kind of goes back to Surah 19, verse 96 that I just read. It says, surely those who believe and lead a righteous life, the most gracious will shower them with love. And then this is exactly what it says. It says, I showered you with love for me, and I had you made before my watchful eye. Uh, and and God reunited him with his sister and his mother by, for forbidding him to drink, to nurse from, any other woman. And, his own mother was brought to him to nurse him so she could be comfortable and stop worrying. That was a blessing for Moses' mother as well as for Moses, so he could be with his mother while, God's plan was being executed. But this was such an immaculate plan, if you think about it, right? Because he doesn't lose his family, and he still ends up, growing in Pharaoh's palace like a prince, and he's able to, deliver the message when he's mature, uh, and and then some verses here that I think that are important. Uh, it says, I made you just for me. Go with your brother, supported by my signs, and do not waver in remembering me. So, but that's a commandment for us too, to not waver in remembering God, and we should remember God day and night as much as possible. The more we remember God, the better chances of us to make it in the hereafter. Because we can be distracted by so many things in this life. And every day. And if God is not your God, like more than 50% of your day, or at least 51% of your day, you're not gonna, make it to heaven. So we have to remember God and remember Him as much as possible, and day and night, sitting, standing, lying down. Any condition you're in, whether you're doing something or not doing something, you just have to remember God. God should be on your mind all the time. Um, and then it, so then this verse 44 says, "Speak to him nicely; he may take heed or become reverent." So obviously, when you deliver the message, initially, I mean, you have to speak to people nicely. But this verse, I've seen this verse taken out of context when people say, you can't be harsh and stern with the disbelievers and the hypocrites, because say, look, God said to Pharaoh, go to Pharaoh and speak nicely. Of course, he did. But then, of course, at the end, when he was transgressing, he wasn't listening, then Moses wasn't nice to him either. And then we see what God did to Pharaoh. But yeah, I mean, of course, when you go and deliver the message, you have to deliver it to the person in the best possible manner so he may listen to it. But if he decides to reject it and he's hell bent on rejecting it, then there's no point in speaking to him nicely at that point. But obviously, this is one of those cases where people abuse the Quran and stretch the truth to extricate a certain meaning and to confuse other people. But Pharaoh was a tyrant, God says, on earth, and he was an oppressor, and obviously, he believed to be a god himself. And wanted people to worship him and his idols that he worshipped. So he wasn't he wasn't a person that deserved to be kind and loving, uh, and uh, and we see what happened to him. So obviously we see that the children of Israel were being persecuted. They were doing a lot of harm to the children and the adults, and that's why he was inspired to go to Pharaoh, because God didn't want these people to be oppressed. And then it says, we have inspired that the retribution will inevitably afflict those who disbelieve and turn away. So this was also a warning that to Pharaoh right at the get-go, that if he didn't take heed, I mean, he was gonna face the consequences. But obviously he didn't believe, so um, you know, uh, so we see what happened. Okay, so God willing, I think I will end here, and if you guys have any questions and comments, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Salãmun. Masha Allah, good study.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, mashallah, very nice. Praise God.
Thank you, Salman.
Thank you.
Assalamu Alaikum. Yeah, I have a comment about Moses and his imperfection.
Hmm.
That just reminds me, God says here that we created you. What does it say? Where is that verse? Under our
I made,
watchful eyes?
yeah, 39.
39. I had made you before my watchful eyes. And And then in another verse, God says, "I created you just for me, to serve His purpose," or the whole thing. But if you ask traditional Muslims, the this is God created him, you know, under His watchful eye, and specially designed him. Even even then, God left some kind of imperfection, right? And then people talk about Prophet Muhammad as the purest soul and the most beautiful soul, and the best, in everything, uh, perfect, you know. So, first of all, we cannot compare and make distinction among any of the messengers, and God knows best um, how He was going to design anyone. Um, Even that design would include that guidance later on they were going to receive. Not that they came into this world on their own, with the design like that was so great that God would fall in love with that. It's just so people don't understand that anything a messenger would bring to people, there's nothing that they are doing. Um, Masha Allah, it's God is running everything. God is the one who would even give them that guidance, and however He would design them, uh, it's not something that they have any um, contribution to. So, just and this there is Moses, with all that, he's still not perfect. It's still a normal looking human being with some imperfections, um, but they wouldn't talk about
Hmm.
anybody else. But and nowhere in Quran God talks about Prophet Muhammad being anything perfect,
Hmm.
or we created all these universes for you or something like that. Anyway, just one of the comment.
Salāmun Alaykum. Yeah, Masha Allah, that was a very good point that you made. I was listening to one of your Quran study from, I think it was May or June, and you made a very awesome point that had God mentioned this, said that for Prophet Muhammad, they might have made him an incarnated God or something, that God made him for himself. And so he must be, they could have take Prophet Muhammad to a level that can't be imaginable. So God purposely did not say that for him. God said that for Moses. That was a very awesome point that you made in previous Quran
Yeah.
Yeah.
study.
Oh, mashallah. Yeah,
Sure.
imagine. I forgot about that. That imagine if this was without mentioning anything like that. That they still claim that universes were created for him. And imagine if God would have said, "I created you just for me," then Allahu Akbar. I cannot
Mhm.
imagine.
Yeah.
And in the Surah
The way.
21, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say that when it says I had made you just for me, I mean, when you look at all the human beings, I mean, we were all created just for God to worship Him alone in that way. So, I mean, if you think about it that way, I mean, we were all made for the purpose to just worship God alone. So it's nothing, nothing's, extraordinary there. But yeah, obviously, they can look at it and take it out of context, and start idolizing them.
God says we didn't we did not create the jinns and humans except to worship me alone. So one can dedicate their life to God and be closer and closer to God. And that's a relationship that God has given us a chance in this world to build with Him. And what more awesome than this could be, rather than talking about, oh, who God created for what and this and that. For our purpose is just to be worshiping, obeying God, and growing our soul and being closer and closer to God, becoming elite of the elite. One of the other thing that about regarding to this topic is the Surah 21 when God says, we did not send you except for mercy. It's talking about Prophet Muhammad. Let me see if I can find the verse. You guys go ahead and talk and I'll find the verse. So it's the 107, 21, 107. We have sent you out of mercy from us towards the whole world. So this verse is really taken out of context, and I have seen this written in the mosque that he was a mercy. He himself was a mercy to the all mankind. In fact, God is saying the opposite. It was a mercy from God that God has sent a messenger, a prophet. When you talk about when you have a child or when you have something good happen, how we say Masha Allah, or this is a mercy from God that God has given me a son or a daughter or wife or anything. We don't make them as a mercy, that this is a mercy. We say it's mercy from God that I have this. So in similar way, God saying it was a mercy of God, and God has sent a book, a messenger and prophet. So, but this verse is completely taken out of context and put a Prophet Muhammad in a position where he is a mercy. So you go to him because he is a mercy. I think if I'm clearing that.
Yeah, so true. Masha Allah.
So I have a question that Moses' brother Harun, and he was so I get a little confused about when they were in Egypt and Pharaoh was killing their firstborn child was being killed, or all of the boys were killed. And when Harun was born, was his younger brother? Because I don't know much about the history. And when he left Egypt, was when he killed that man, and then he ran away. Harun was with him, or when they were coming back, when they were traveling with the family, when he saw the fire. I mean, who was in this family? Was Harun was with him or not? Anybody have any idea on that?
Right? I think it was just Moses who ran away. So his brother didn't run away with him. And so it was just Moses coming back with his family from uh, Egypt. I mean, from Jerusalem. Jerusalem?
Okay.
Yeah.
So Pharaoh was killing the firstborn child, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think it was just at the time he was killing all the boys, that were being born.
once that was over, then Harun was born, probably, right?
Yeah, I think he was his younger brother.
Hmm.
Yeah. But these this was kind of like one of the things in the beginning before the circumcision argument erupted that kind of made me question like people's understanding and knowledge of the Quran, because despite what we know from the Quran, like the verse that I mentioned that where Moses Pharaoh is clearly saying that this person who is lowly and can hardly speak shows that Moses clearly had the speech impediment. Um, people and what I read from the script, also from the messenger, where he showed him that he has the impediment, and then God is saying that I let this be there on purpose because I don't want people to get you know to follow the message because of your eloquence. I wanted to people follow the message for the message. People were still insisting that because God says God promises a perfect life for the believers, that his impediment was fixed. And I was like, you guys don't have any proof at all to back up what you're saying. It's all they're just guessing. They're like, no, how can you say that? God says. I mean, I posed it as a question, to people, and then I realized that they got stuck, and they kept saying his speech impediment was fixed and God cured him and stuff like that. And first they were saying that this speech impediment was just he was just like shy or something, or stuttering. And then I read this from the script, that how the impediment looked like, at least in the movie. And then but then they were still stuck on saying that God fixed it. And I was like, well, how can you say something that you have no knowledge, you have no proof, and where did it say God fixed it? And because of the verse that it said, your request is granted. So that was, to me, was clearly talking about his request to bring Aaron, as his supporting prophet, so they can go and deliver the message and glorify him frequently and all that, right? But clearly his speech problem was not fixed. And anyways, just wanted to throw that extra piece of information there.
Yeah, you're very right. I mean, there's no way God says that He's fixed it. His so He has. It's amazing how God's system works. At the same time, God is testing Moses. He didn't take his anger away. See, and
Hmm.
I think He's praying that
Right.
make
Hmm.
me and send Aaron with me. See how He says,
Take
strengthen
my temper, yes.
yeah, strengthen me with him. Let him be my partner in this matter. So this part is actually a good part, that you're asking God to make someone with me, so we can glorify you more. So this was a positive thing God guaranteed instantly. But the other two things where he's asking for anger, and the other one is his tongue, and God could have taken that away, but it was a test for Moses. At the same time, it was test for the people of Egypt. That imagine a person walking in their big palace and he can't even talk. And would you want to see the message, or would you want to see who's bringing it? Who you want to examine the message, or who you want to examine who's bringing it? It's amazing. This was a hard test for them too. Imagine somebody who just walks in and can't even speak and say, I am the messenger of God. However he was speaking, I'm not trying to mock him, so I'm sorry. But he was like, you just kind of imagine in your head how he was talking in this big palace, and with stuttering voice. And like, how kids talk, and when they're barely learning. Something like that, in that imagination, you can imagine. And he's walking in, and with this message, people may be laughing at that point too. Oh, who are you? You run away, and you can't even talk. And so the test
Hmm.
was for them that to see the message, and then with his miracles. So this is amazing how God let that for him, so you can test the people. And the question is that his tongue was, I heard, is, I don't know if it's in this Quran or it's in others in Bible, that his tongue was messed up because he put fire in his mouth. You know anything about that?
No.
I don't know if it's, I read in Hadith or somewhere that he picked up one of the, what you call those, charcoal, fired up, and put it in his mouth, uh, and when he was a kid. I don't know if that's true or,
That must be a hadith.
yeah.
Anything outside the Quran, there is no information, right? So,
Right. I just want to verify if it's in the Quran or not.
actually, no.
Hmm.
Yeah. Even if it was in the Bible, I mean, we could still not be sure, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. If it's not in the Quran, because we have such a detailed history of Moses,
Hmm.
right? So,
Assalamu alaikum, Salman. I didn't get to listen to the whole Quran study, or probably not all of it.
uh,
So,
then you can't comment. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
so when you're saying that, where is it? I seek refuge in complete content rejected. He said, your request is granted, O Moses. You're saying of the
Hmm.
cool my temper, untie the knot, and appointing Aaron as assistant. You're saying that all three of those were not fulfilled?
Yeah, I'm saying that the speech impediment was not fixed. And I read, there's actually a verse in the Quran where, because, this was the very beginning that, this is something that he asked God, right? That just when God spoke to him, we see that he asked God for this. But, oops, you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Oh,
you.
okay, sorry. Yeah, I thought I got disconnected. So he asked God, but so if you read the verse, uh, let me pull up the verse. It says, let me bring back hardly. So if you see Surah 43, verse 52, um, uh, it says Pharaoh 51. It says Pharaoh announced to his people, O my people, do I not possess the kingship over Egypt, and these flowing rivers belong to me? Do you not see? Which one is better, me or that one who is lowly and can hardly speak? So this verse shows that, even when he went to Pharaoh, I mean, when he Moses went to Pharaoh, he still had the problem because he could hardly speak. And then I read from the script what the Master of the Covenant wrote, and in the script, he explains a dialogue that occurs between Moses and God, and God said that this was not part of God's plan to fix his speech because he wanted, you know, uh, him to get the message not based on his eloquence, but based on the message. You know, um, so just as an additional piece of evidence there, because I believe that um, Rashad, being a messenger of God, you know, when he's putting even a dialogue with God, like he's not going to fabricate a lie about God. That's, God said, I'm going to do this, or this is his, or maybe show something as part of God's system that's not true, So obviously he had some guidance from God to even write that dialogue. It might not be verbatim from God that way, but at least based on the verse from the Quran, I know for a fact that the speech impediment was there, And so, but I still brought that up from the script as an additional piece of evidence to show people, especially the part about the speech impediment too, because people were saying that the speech impediment wasn't really an impediment because God's people are perfect, and they take the perfection to like a different level, uh, unfortunately, and they take it too far. I think so. That was the reason why they were having a very tough time accepting. And actually, they didn't accept. And they were fighting, till arguing with me about this, uh, till the circumcision issue came up. So.
Thanks, Salman. So the way I
Okay.
read it, right? When I read it, starting from verse 25, when it says he said, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was one question with a lot of requests. It was one asking. It wasn't like separate. It was he said, and then he went on, cool my temper and make it easy for me and untie the knot and appoint an assistant. So when I read it as he made he was begging God, and it was not like separate requests. That's how I read it.
Yeah.
And then when God says,
But it also
when
says
God
your
says,
request is granted. You see
yes.
there are a number of requests. So.
So when I saw that, I thought because he said and everything was and, so it was all in one, and that's when it says when. That's how I understood it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I understand like that too.
Yeah, that's how I
Because it's one
understood.
package of request, right? And then
Yes.
God says, your wish has been granted. So if we just read Quran and we never read the, even in the script, it doesn't say that it wasn't corrected. The I'm just saying my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say when he goes to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh could be mentioning the previous Moses, which he saw, who could, or he remembered, who could barely speak. So it doesn't actually, we shouldn't say it was never granted because we don't have the proof for that. I
Okay,
don't think
so
it's a proof that
no,
that
he asked
Moses.
her. He asked
Uh-huh.
this request, but he asked this request when God, when he was going to Moses, and he said, "I want this fixed before
Right.
I go." Right,
Right.
and then we see then when he went, clearly it wasn't fixed.
No.
So,
When he said that about Moses, what
but we
Pharaoh
can
is.
say,
Uh-huh.
but you can't. I don't think we can say that it was fixed because we have no proof that it was fixed. I mean,
But then
because you
when
know that
God says, I,
because
I grant you your wish.
you can read it in two different ways because he makes one request, then he makes another request, and he makes another request, and God says your request is granted. But like, let's say, if you or I, we pray to God in the morning, and I ask God for 10 things, and God's and after, in the end, God says, okay, your request is granted. I don't necessarily think that
At the same
it
time.
answered
Mhm.
every prayer, that I asked God for.
Or
uh,
it would be granted in different timings.
yeah, I mean, it could be, but the relevant thing for me was at that time when he asked God to fix it, when he went to Pharaoh.
Mhm.
He still had the speech impediment. Yeah, later, could it have been fixed? Who knows? But at that time when he was there as a messenger, it wasn't fixed. And I can see that, the script as additional piece of information. I mean, obviously, it's not something for a religious guidance or a law or something, right? But to me, that's a further elaboration of the story and what happened, that this clearly he went to him and he was speaking like that, and Moses was talking to him in ridicule, belittling him, and not believing in him because of that, and he was using it against him to repel other people. So that's all. I mean, um, you know uh, I don't see any contradiction, for example, in what he was saying in the script, versus what is being said in the Quran. I see that as it's confirming what God says in the Quran, because otherwise the verse would not say that he can't. It doesn't say he could hardly speak, because he still had the impediment.
Mhm.
It says me, or one who can hardly speak. And then
Mhm.
especially another thing is that I don't. see that a messenger of God would, like attribute a lie to God, even
No.
in a movie, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine that you shared that with us, but if we go by Quran, then I think that verse is enough. I just
If you go by
personally
Quran,
would not want
yeah,
to mention the script, right? Like,
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Yeah.
but not everybody has access to it, Solomon. That's why I'm saying for verification. That's all.
I mean, if anybody wants to verify, that's different. But I mean, the point is not the script. The point is the speech impediment, right?
Yeah, I'm saying the speech impediment. Uh, explaining you explained that verse, and mashallah, that's the proof. If we go further to a script that obviously also has dialogues of God, so for the sake of the argument, I'm saying probably not necessary. That's all. I know if okay, we'll talk about it later, inshallah. Right now, right now. But that's you explained the verse that he could. It's not. He's not speaking in the past. He's speaking in the present. So obviously that means Moses was still stuttering. Since Quran is complete, and that is the proof that we could. I mean, I until today I was reading it like all the wishes were granted and the knot was gone from his tongue. But seems like when he brought the message and you explained it, mashallah, that is the proof that it was not resolved right away. So even if we ask God certain wishes in one go, right?
Hmm.
We praying like I want this and please forgive my sins and also guide me and this and that. So the wish is granted, and every wish has a certain time to be fulfilled for a reason, right? Not immediately. I'll get the car and the house and the job, for
Yeah,
example, right?
yeah, but again,
Hmm.
it's I don't like, if it like if the way I read it in the script, and I know that might be uncomfortable for people, but the way I read it in the script, the explanation makes sense why the wish wasn't granted. Because God could have granted it right then, right?
Hmm.
Why not fix it right there?
Right, right.
Because
No,
God,
I hear you. I hear you.
right? So based on that, I mean, as long as he's a messenger,
Yeah,
then it should be there because that's the reason behind it,
true. I mean, that's written by a messenger, and
right?
obviously he would not put any conjecture
Yeah,
in it.
yeah. Like, see, like for
Um,
example, Rashad had an accent, right?
I
An
am.
Egyptian,
We are at the
thick
level of
Egyptian accent,
understanding these things
right?
thoroughly. I'm just saying
Yeah,
people might have problem with that, and
yeah. I mean,
even
if
then we
anybody, yeah, I mean, if anybody has a problem with it, their problem with it. But
right.
I
But
don't have a problem with it.
I know I'm coming back to that fact
Yeah,
that mashallah Quran is still complete, right?
yeah. I
That
mean, yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
and so when we say that, I think that's important because when we say the Quran is complete, right? I mean, and I share something from an audio,
Hmm. Hmm.
that doesn't mean the Quran is not complete,
No, 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 no.
right? Because I'm still everything that is in the audio is still confirmed, is still from the Quran. So I see the same thing, even though he wrote a script and he explained it in the form of a movie where he explains the story of Moses. It's still he's still explaining that story from the Quran. He's elaborating on the story. And given that not everybody, I understand that everybody doesn't have access to, so they can't read it.
That was
But
just
that's
my point. Like
right, right.
among us, I would you tell me, I'm like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, that's interesting, right?
Right, right.
Extra piece of information, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
but it's audio video will still have access. Not everybody has access. So that's
That's an
all
actually
I'm saying.
important point, I think, because
Mhm.
that that shows me that everybody should have access to it.
That is a case is gonna go on forever. And I'm sure you will keep fighting for that. One day, Solomon, maybe God will grant you
Yeah, yeah, no,
victory
but
in
I'm
that
saying,
sense.
I mean, it's easy
I
to
know,
give
I
access
know.
to people,
Yeah, mashallah.
just like they have access to audios
No,
and
you're
stuff,
right. Everybody
Yeah,
should. It shouldn't be like
yeah,
a hidden secret
yeah.
and controlled by some people.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah, I agree. And then talk about tests here. Um, that, Moses' mother being inspired to throw him into the box, then throw him into the river. The river will throw him onto the shore to be picked up by an enemy of mine and an enemy of his. I showered you with love from me, and I had made you before my watchful eye. Bella. Yeah, so I mean, talk about a mother's. She must be given a. Obviously, God talks about a divine assurance from God, like God inspired her, or I don't know in what way, or strengthened her heart with invisible, assurance to do that, to save, in order to save Moses from being murdered by Pharaoh's soldiers, or but then God brought him, like, the plan about Moses and everything about Moses and learning from the history. Um, just like you were saying, Salva, that there is a lot of lessons. Subhanallah. God raised him at Pharaoh's, with Pharaoh, to be, to learn all the skills, to be strong, and you know, uh, in order to be able to face him one day, not as a slave but as an equal, to have that courage, right? And face to face one day. I'm sure other people would not have been even allowed to come anywhere near him since he was such a tyrant. But yeah, so God's plans are revealed in the future. Like when God says, trust in God in every matter, we have to, even though when we don't see things very clearly at the moment, and uh, we're confused, like, how is this happening right now? And doesn't make any sense. But as a submitter, if we always trust God, and then in right time, we will understand the reason of everything, inshallah.
Yeah, mashallah, mashallah. Many times uh, in our daily life, we come into a situation where we don't know what to do. We just going crazy. I I was working for this company, and I was having a hard time. And I in one year I thought about it. My first year, thought about two times leaving and going back to my previous job, which was easy and was not paying as much, but it was easy. But this was harder, and I just sitting down. I cannot make up my mind how God makes you do something, and at that time you don't realize, and I end up staying. And mashallah, and it turned out to be good once everything was settled. Uh, remember your story? I don't want. I don't know if you mentioned it, but I'll just say in part of it that remember when you had a issue with the tonsils, and you just walked up and left the hospital. It was just inspired a decision that you made.
Right. Yeah,
Uh,
for my daughter, exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
that's right.
remember that? Yeah, and
I
so
know,
you,
inspired.
yeah, something gets over you, and then just you do it, and then later you realize, oh my God, and you didn't even plan it; it just happened. So when Moses' mother, she was
Mashallah.
just sitting down and holding the child in her arm, closing, to her, and imagine what's going on with her head. So every you cannot question a mother's love. Nobody can question. And so nobody can even doubt a mother's love. And doing this is unimaginable. So it was purely guided by God.
Subhanallah, yeah. I give you another example. You know the in this surah, or is this? Oh gosh, my memory is getting really bad. um, oh yeah, it's here. I love this statement. Verse 9. Have you noted the history of Moses? When he saw fire, he said to his family, "Stay here. I have seen a fire. Maybe I can bring you some of it, or find some guidance at the fire." Uh, so, this verse 10 is just, is for me personally, for every matter which is like kind of, oh, should it be or should it not be? And then I remember this verse all the time, that of course God is running everything, right? When you put it, think about in the bigger picture. So you're taking a step to do something, and two things can happen, right? That's what I've gotten, the biggest lesson from Moses. I don't know if I'm saying it clearly or not, but I always take it like, okay, either it would be some benefit or a lesson for me, so why not? God will teach me a lesson. Let's say it is something I'm going to do and it turns out to be the wrong one. I'll learn a lesson, and if it is a good, something good for me, then I achieved the benefit of it, in without having any difficulty, the bring guidance or the warmth, something. There are lessons for everything we do. Then nothing goes, if we are always reflective of our actions, right? And everything has a lesson for us, um, as long as we keep on reflecting. Oh, how did this turn out to be? And then we can see either it taught us a lesson or there was already a benefit God had planned for us. So for me, the learning from Moses history is this part I always keep with me because I am a person like that. I always go, my scale is like, anything I do, I go 100 times like this way or that way, this way or that way. And then I'm like, okay, think like Moses. It can be either that or that. Um, I hope I was a little bit clear, but that's how I see life, and most of the things which are unknown to me, when I go for it, like I already think, okay, as long as we implore God to guide us, and then we can have either that or that.
Yeah, Masha, the last statement that you made, you should implore God to guide us. So this is, I think, the lesson we should learn, that every time we are in a situation, or any other situation, or whatever is going on, keeping God in our mind. And when you have a decision to make, go
Yeah,
back to
sure.
the source. Pray to God. God, I'm confused. I don't know what to do. You are my guidance. You are my light. Please help me in this matter. And probably Moses' mother was praying to God like that too, probably.
Yeah, I share with you something, that how everything is so divinely controlled. Like the other day, I went for a job interview, which was like a really desperate um, attempt, and I knew it. It's like I'm underselling myself and settling for really little, and not, the job wasn't really my style, but I'm like, oh, but let's have this for the time being. So one interview happened on the phone, and then another one, they called me. So I was excited to go there. Okay, some benefits were really interesting and this and that. But this is what happens. The all night I couldn't sleep. I was up all night. In the morning, completely wiped out. Whatever about the company I had learned, forgotten. And when I go for the interview, wrong things coming out of my mouth. I cannot believe it. It's like something took over me. And honestly, literally, something took over me. They would ask me something and I would say something horrendously wrong. And I was surprised at myself. And I was so, my posture. And I realized there was a chewing gum in my mouth.
Oh
It's
my
one of
God.
the biggest no for an interview. Oh my
Yeah.
God. I came out of that and I'm like, wow, I started to laugh. I'm like, seriously, that was divine. And like, no, there is no way that I had given this interview. And obviously, I didn't get that.
Yeah. Maybe it was not good for you. And
No,
thought,
absolutely, it wasn't. It wasn't even my something I was settling for really less. Anyway, yeah. God is running everything, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely everything. Subhanallah.
I do have a question, kind of. So every time I read verse 30, when it says throw and it says three times, and I always thought that's pretty harsh. So if you look up the word throw, it's to propel through the air by a forward motion of the hand and arm. So I know God must have a reason for saying throw. So if anybody can shed light on that.
When he threw throw
Says
down the
harsh.
staff or what?
No. Verse 39.
Throw the baby.
Yes. Because when I saw the word throw, for me it's harsh, and then when I read the explanation in the dictionary, it says to propel through the air by a forward motion of the hand and the arm.
Uh-huh.
To propel through the air in any manner.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to drown the baby, so you just have to make the baby float. You can throw in different ways.
Like, and she could be in a hurry too that nobody spots her.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, I
let's
mean,
throw it in the
yeah,
basket and push it
yeah.
away.
Yeah, I mean, throw can also be drop, like you say, you tell someone to throw something in the bin. You don't mean that they have to, like, throw it, like, with force. They can just go and drop it. So you don't take it
or
literally.
or saying like, "I'll drop you off at the airport." You don't just drop them or pick them up. You don't pick them up with your hand.
Hmm.
Like, I'm sure the basket, she quickly had to throw the baby in it.
Hmm.
Not like
Yeah.
throw from a
Hmm.
height, but quickly, and push it in the water. So obviously she was hiding it from the people. They were looking everywhere for the babies. Mm.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Because someone said, it's like throwing something in the garbage, throwing it too far, just, quickly, doing it
Quickly, yeah.
quickly. Like I could tell my children, throw the clothing in the hamper, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, it just seems like when I looked at the definition of that word, it seems very harsh.
Right. Yeah, throw down the staff too. It's not like he, banged it on the floor, right? Um, it's just forward motion, right? Forward motion. But I, I just have a comment or a common question. Like, I know that traditional Muslims really um, are reverent towards Prophet Muhammad, worship him. Christians worship Jesus, but I don't see that so much from Jewish community about Moses. Anybody has any knowledge on that, or this question is just irrelevant?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that, not every messenger and prophet has been idolized in that way. you know.
Mm-hmm.
So Moses wasn't idolized in that way.
Right. That's
Yeah,
I'm right,
yeah,
right? It doesn't
yeah,
seem like I don't know
yeah,
Jewish culture very much, but they
yeah.
what they did was they innovated a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I
They
mean, they
made
idolize their rabbis and stuff.
yeah, they
Yeah,
created provisions, self
yeah,
provisions, and
yeah.
really God's revelations were literally
Mm-hmm,
sold, meaning
mm-hmm,
that taken out and thrown away.
mm-hmm,
Like, hey, this doesn't suit us, take it out, for a price,
mm-hmm,
because rabbis were controlling the
mm-hmm.
Torah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's more of the rabbis, that they reverence.
Mm-hmm,
Uh,
mm-hmm.
they reverence, and whatever the rabbis say, they
Right.
followed. And
Because according to the history, when Jesus came, the religion was just a mockery,
Mhm,
and um, literally was things were out of context, and
mhm.
did not
Right.
believe, even though they knew the prophecy of Jesus coming, right? They still did not
Hmm.
believe.
Yeah.
Still don't believe. Same thing with messenger of the covenant. The prophecy is there, and then they're waiting for Imam Mahdi, our traditional
Hmm.
Muslims. And then there are two schools of thoughts. One say that
Hmm.
Imam Mahdi would be the 13th Imam from Prophet Muhammad's progeny or his descendants. And the other one is that Jesus is going to be that a person, will be resurrected, which is taken out of Christian mythology. Obviously, it's just a mythology right now. That Jesus will be resurrected and come back to earth. And even though actually it's God Himself who will come here and the second earth will take place. Because if you look at Mormons, what they sell is that everything is going to happen here, and the second earth will be established. And so the bits and pieces from every, I'm sure that at one point a lot of information about resurrection and the hereafter was in the previous scriptures too, but now it's just fragments of information here and there, and it's all messed up.
I was watching verse 40, and it's in the middle of it. It says, "And when you killed the soul, we saved you from the grievous consequences. Indeed, we tested you thoroughly." And it's like a lot of times we see things but we don't understand it. So if Moses was living in our time, we would have said, he's a murderer kind of thing, right? But in God was that was a test for him with God. And same thing with Joseph. When he went to prison, like, we would have said he went to prison because he committed adultery. That's what, as human being we see. But then God had different plans for them.
Right.
So, Nida, I want to come back to your point is Surah 9, verse 30.
Mm-hmm.
Jews said Ezra is son of God, while Christians said Jesus is son of God. These are blasphemous utterance by their mouths. They thus match the blasphemies of those who have disbelieved in the past. God condemns them. They have surely deviated. So the question is, who was Ezra? And so they did make someone as son of God too, right?
Yeah, but not Moses. But if you ask today's modern Jews, Ezra, many of them, like I haven't found people who even know this character.
Hmm.
It's so weird. I don't know. Anyways, plus I'm ignorant about Jewish history or whatever the religion is, so I might not know enough. Can't say.
You know about circumcision.
Well, that should be enough.
So, Solomon, I have a question to you.
To me? Okay.
In the previous Quran studies, this was the heated debate, and a lot of people got upset. And I just want to clarify one thing on that. That this is when you say be nice, and
Mhm.
as I look at you, uh, when you talk, I haven't noticed like you losing temper. Even if you're telling other what to do, you will just say at your point according to the Quran. Masha Allah, that's what I sort of notice. All of you, and this is the blessing of God, not good in our part. So be nice. I mean, I also come into situations where somebody's doing wrong, and so be nice is basically like if you have a good friend and is making a mistake, and would you rather tell him or her that I think this is not right? You're gonna get hurt, or you want to keep it to yourself, say thinking that you may get offended. So I will not say it. And what best advice we can give is other than telling them to be righteous if somebody is not being righteous or making mistake, which is gonna hurt their soul. And if you keep it to ourselves, I think this person is not gonna like. I know one submitter is. I feel like it's breaking a commandment, but I will say I think he already knows it, or he'll be offended. So I'll keep it to myself, or you get in. So be nice is that in that sense that when you see something wrong, at least tell them. Or being nice is not like you go and start blundering at them and getting angry and how could you do that? You are wrong, this and that. That's not in that sense, right?
I don't understand what you're
The
saying.
question.
Yeah, yeah. You're
The
saying
question is
can we be nice to them?
no, nice in that sense that when somebody's making a mistake, yeah, in general sense, like I think we should be nice to everybody. We shouldn't be saying anything hurtful to anyone. I think that's being like, how are you? And being nice in that sense. But if somebody's making a mistake, so be nice. When you say Moses, you went to them, God says, be nice to Pharaoh.
Hmm.
So, but when he saw him doing wrong stuff, so he was on like going angry and yelling at him or something. He was probably telling him, look, Moses, look, Pharaoh, this is wrong. You should obey God and this and that in a nice way, or not like screaming at him, right?
Well, not being nice doesn't mean you have to scream at people, but
Right.
God says, the believers are kind and compassionate amongst themselves, for example, and
Right.
harsh and stern against the disbelievers, because these are not people that you're just giving the message to. Obviously, when you give the message to people, that have when there is a possibility that these people might take heed,
Mm-hmm.
you have to present it in the best possible manner, right? But when someone's a disbeliever or destined for hell, then you're not gonna be nice to them, and this is mentioned in Surah 48, verse 29. If you see the quality of the believers, right? It says Muhammad, the messenger of God, and those with him are harsh and stern against the disbelievers, but kind and compassionate amongst themselves. And the messenger of the covenant also gave an example of the believers. This verse, like they're like pussycats with each other, and they're like lions with the disbelievers, right? So yeah, you give the message to people kindly and everything, you do everything right, but then you have people that are really evil people, and they're bent on distorting the religion and fighting you and stuff like that. And then with those people, you have to be harsh and stern. You don't turn the other cheek and let them walk all over you. You have to fight with them, obviously, and you have to combat every move they make. So there's no point in being nice to these people, right? uh, that and you can also see that in other verses. For example, another verse where it says you don't help them by being nice, which is Surah 4, verse 109, subtitle, you do not help them by being nice. And you can look at it also this way, like, let's say if you see someone who's going to fall in the ditch, right? You're gonna tell him like kindly, hey, watch out, you're gonna fall in a ditch. And this is also from the messenger of the covenant, by the way. and then you see the person going further, and your voice gets louder and louder, and then when he's just falling in, you're gonna grab him by the neck. He's like, hey, wake up, like, what are you doing, and so a lot of times it's just even to convey the seriousness of the situation and what they're doing, because if you just maybe like sure could like, hey brother, this is not good for you and this and that, he's not even going to understand the gravity of the situation that you're trying to convey sometimes, like it's like you have a child and he's about to kill himself or something, I mean, you're gonna tell him kindly and stuff, and then eventually you're gonna get louder so that the child understands what he's doing is like seriously wrong, but with the believers, I mean, and disbelievers, I mean, it's kind of like very clear that if somebody is a disbeliever and they've made up their mind and they're just there to cause chaos and change the truth and attack the believers, then you just treat them with how they need to be treated, which is that Quran says you have to be harsh and stern with them.
Yeah,
Um,
if they're like aggressive against you, trying to hurt you with tongue and everything, yeah, I understand that
No, they
part.
don't
But
have
if
to be aggressive. They can be very evil without being
hmm
aggressive, Like
oh yeah, yeah,
they can be misleading people. You don't have to be aggressive to do
yeah,
that, Yeah.
I also want to add to it, Adam, that when God says to Moses, the messenger of the covenant has told us that, in one of the audio I heard, that every disbeliever is a potential believer. When you give message to somebody, you're gonna invite to God's path, to a completely person who has no, an ignorant person who has no knowledge of the scripture or anything. So you give them message with love and kindness. Obviously, you invite them to the path of God, so they can be ready to listen, right? And and the and this is not about those. And somebody can just say one day, like, no, this doesn't work for me. Then you leave them alone. But those, God has very strict words for the hypocrites and those who make uh, the path of God crooked knowingly and fight because of God, not for personal issues. Our love and hate should be only connected to God. If somebody personally doesn't dislike us, who cares? Whether they're disbelievers or no, or anyone, that doesn't matter. But if somebody knowingly, for example, I read you one verse here. Surah 3, verse 119. Here you are loving them while they do not love you, and you believe in all the scripture. When they meet you, they say, we believe. But as soon as they leave, they bite their fingers out of rage towards you. Say, God is commanding the messenger to say, die in your rage. God is fully aware of the innermost. Die, like, what would be the harsher than this comment, right? Say, die in your rage. Because the hypocrites will come and they say, oh yeah, I believe in God alone and the scripture and the previous scriptures. Uh, but God knows their innermost thought. The hypocrites will never like you. They will never be happy with the believers. They always hate them with fury. Like literally, God is describing, they bite their fingers out of rage towards you. So that's how God is saying. Like, even sometimes we feel like, oh my gosh, this person hasn't done anything personally wrong to me. How could I, be harsh with them? But that's what's the problem is with a lot of people. Like, oh no, we're brethren, we're all brethren in faith and just love each other and love, love, love. That's very Christian mythology, and that God is all love. You know, God, we know from the Quran, God does not love many attributes of human being. And how they react and how they do. So if somebody is fighting you because of God, we cannot go and say, "Oh no, but I love you." God says, "Tell them this." So, and the verses Solomon has read tell us clearly how to even behave, so they get the right message. Like, no, as long as you persist on your ways and then repel other people from path of God, because hypocrites are more damaging than disbelievers. Disbelievers cannot damage the religion from the outside. They will just not believe what we believe. But hypocrites will sit among you, spread poison, and repel other people from path of God. And doubts, create doubts. That's the biggest problem. And I have first-handedly, and I'm sure Solomon too, we have seen and faced people like that, that what a little doubt can do and how far that can go. It can turn masses of people away from the truth. One little doubt. So if you're not harsh enough with them and stay on the ground and say, no, but the Quran says this and God says this, you show them the proof and they still insist. It's not like my own opinion or your own opinion. Let's say what God is saying and clear proof is there. And they still
Mhm.
insist on, no, but this is what it is. That's where you draw the line, you know.
Inshallah.
Yeah. Inshallah.
Yeah, I just also have another verse, this is from Surah 60, verse 4. Surah 60, the test, verse 4. This Abraham example. A good example has been set for you by Abraham and those with him. They said to their people, we disown you and the idols that you worship beside God. We denounce you, and you will see nothing from us except animosity and hatred until you believe in God alone. Uh, and then it continues where he made the mistake about asking forgiveness for his father. And then I think also the messenger of the covenant example was significant. He was uh, his father's favorite son, and he really loved him, but he was trying to give him the message. So he was coming to the masjid for a few months, and he was giving him the message, and then one day his father said that he was not gonna come to this masjid because until he puts Muhammad's name in the azan, you know. And then Rashad said he told him that as long as he believes that way, he said he's never to step foot in this masjid, And he was his favorite son. He was his father, right? So of all the people, you have to honor your parents, and you said that's your father. And we see Abraham's example is exactly the same. You see nothing from them except animosity and hatred, right? You're not going to see niceness. You're going to see animosity and hatred. And I think if you followed those studies closely, you see that I brought that example too. Like how would you define, like, this person was really trying to downplay the meaning of harshness and sternness, right? And then I brought this verse about animosity and hatred, and how you're going to have animosity and hatred towards them. And then I don't think this person really responded to that, right? But I think it's pretty simple. We can't, like, some people have baggage, like maybe they come from Christianity, and they teach that in the churches, for example. You just love everyone, and you get slapped on one cheek and you turn the other cheek. And the messenger of the covenant clearly says we can't do that. This is not what God teaches us in the Quran. You're supposed to love your personal enemies, but not people who are religious enemies. So you don't do that for your own good.
Solomon, I have a question,
Hmm.
and for everyone. That so God talks about um, regarding the relative, and
Hmm.
not all the submitters will have relatives who are submitters, or your parents or your siblings. or your children. Some of your children could be Samir, some not, but they don't fight you about the religion. And even though you gave them the message and they rejected it, and after that they say, just don't talk to us about it anymore. How? What are we supposed to do with them? Like,
Mm,
disown them or still continue
mhm,
amicably? They don't fight
mhm,
you because of the religion, because there
mhm,
is a criteria in the Quran too
mhm,
for those who don't fight you because of the religion.
mhm,
They do not evict you, blah blah blah. Because some, for example, if there is a relative or you have a parent, you became a submitter, and the parents like so annoyed, they say, "Get out of my house." They evict you
mhm,
because of the religion from the house, and that happens, right? That happens to people. They kick their you know
mhm,
children out, and in the history we read too. But they say like, "No, I understand. You know, to use your religion, and then please don't preach it to me anymore."
mhm.
So then we kind of still continue as brothers and sisters or parents or whatever.
Well, you just read the verse. You said, "How can you secretly love them? They're disbelieved and
No,
you
it's
know,
not about love. I don't feel love for those people. But
right."
what about, like, you meet them in functions
Mhm,
and you visit them
mhm,
for something happens, like if somebody's sick or somebody's wedding, whatnot. Um, I how to um,
Yeah, I mean, of course, you're not going to be warm with them, right? 'Cause they're not.
right.
They've disregarded the message. But I mean, there's still, to me, I see it like, there's two kinds of people, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
one kind where you give them the message, they don't reject it, but they don't
Mm-hmm.
accept it either, right? And those kinds of people, obviously, you leave the door open for them because, if they might accept it at some point, and you treat
Mm-hmm.
them as potential believers. But people who say that don't even talk to me about it, I'm not going to accept it and
Mm-hmm.
this and that. I mean, they have really. It's like it reminds me of those verses where it says that, where they say our minds are made up, our ears are
Yeah,
deaf to
yeah,
your
yeah.
message.
Mm-hmm.
So you just disregard such people, right? I mean, they don't want
Just don't,
anything to hear
do
about
not
God, and you
extend
just.
your hands. God says, do not extend your hands of friendship
Hmm.
towards them.
Yeah.
So, meaning keep a distance, but stay amicable
Hmm.
as long as they're not fighting you.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I don't see them as potentials, right?
I
Because
don't
they're a thing.
know.
Yeah.
These people I'm talking about, they are not potential
Hmm.
anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And also the way we see it, also, they're not hypocrites, right? They don't want to take your
Yeah,
message.
they're disbelievers, right?
Right. So they're disbelievers. And at the end, we see that, if there are relatives or so, you treat them amicably. Doesn't have to be extending the love, but we treat them amicably. They can be disbeliever as long as they are not, um, you call hypocrites, or they're not aggressing against you. I mean, we treat them amicably. It's just we're not extending our love to them. That's how we see it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But based on the verses, if someone is a disbeliever, and disbeliever meaning that, not just any disbeliever, like disbeliever, like you give them the message and they reject it and they say we don't want to hear it anymore. Like those are, and they're not potential believers. Then the verse says, you're harsh and stern with the disbelievers. It's not just hypocrites, right?
Right.
The verse I read was about disbelievers also.
It's a big
So
testament.
yeah.
Mm, I hear you. Yeah. Exactly.
So, Suleiman, are you saying that to be harsh and
No, I'm just
firm
saying
with
like
your
you don't extend like warmth and love and friendship to those people.
yeah, and that's what I said, and that's
Okay.
what actually I was saying. That yeah,
Okay.
you don't extend love, and
Oh, when you
so
say
it
amicable,
just
that I think that you're being kind to them.
okay. No,
Yeah.
it just when it's amicable, just regular,
Right, right.
you in the society and you have
Mhm.
everyone around you who
Right,
does
right.
not believe in
Right,
your
right.
faith, but it doesn't mean that I have to be,
Mm-hmm.
not
Right. Me. Yeah.
treat them no matter. So that's
Right.
what it means.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm. So I
Yeah. Like those
there
kind of
is.
people, like I won't give them charity or anything. You know, I would
Hmm.
I would try to give it to people, who I see as potentials.
But
So
Uh,
if they're
for
your
ex-
parents, you
Mhm.
still want to be nice to them because as long they're not against your religion or something, right?
Or fighting you.
Yeah. Because parents have more value,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. But your parents don't tell you, hey, don't tell me about your religion. I hate it or something like that, right? I mean, if they do that, then you're supposed to run for your life.
Hmm.
My father, I've been giving him messages for a long time. And about a year ago, I literally, like you can imagine, sitting on the floors in that kind of environment, just begging that, Dad, this is the right path.
Mm-hmm.
Let's follow the Quran. And we had a very long chat, but he keep on refusing. And then at the end, he got very upset. He said, "I will see you in 5 years. Don't talk to me at all for 5 years, and I'll see you where you are." So God made these words come out of my mouth that I can never go wrong worshiping my God alone. 5 year or 10 year, whatever, it's okay, Dad. So that was the end of the conversation. So, mashallah. But at the same time, I get offended too because he's my dad on one side, and on the other side is my creator who created me, who gave me my father and mother. So who should I be more loving towards? If, like, in a regular sense, if you think, if I have a mother and I know someone doesn't like my mom, I wouldn't be too nice to that person because this person doesn't like and says bad things about my mom. I would be, in fact, become, if I have to deal with him, I would not be very nice. I mean, not in a loving manner.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I have my creator, my Lord, and who loves me and who has guided me. And if somebody is the enemy of God openly, how
Mm-hmm.
naturally I will be. I'll talk to him if he doesn't, I mean, hurt me or say hurtful things. But in my heart, I will not have compassion toward that person who hates my Lord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Whatever.
there's if you look at this verse, Surah 9, verse 113, it says, "You shall disown God's enemies. Abraham disowned his father." It says, "Neither the prophet nor those who believe shall ask forgiveness for the idol worshippers, even if they were their nearest of kin, once they realize that they're destined for hell." The only reason Abraham asked forgiveness for his father was that he had promised him to do so. But here's the part. But as soon as he realized that he was an enemy of God, he disowned him. And then it says Abraham was extremely kind and clement. So this was a person who was extremely kind and clement, but once he realized that his father was destined for hell, he disowned him. Simply, right? So when you
Right.
disown someone, like, you're not gonna give them charity or anything, you're just gonna, there's so many other people that are there, I mean, I just rather help them and stuff. So, I mean, you can disown your own father, even though God says you have to be kind to them. But if they become to this point where they're destined for hell, then that's it. But if you have hope for them, you see that they might become submitters, then they're not destined for hell. Then you should treat them as potentials. And if they tell you about worshiping idols, whatever, you obviously don't obey them and stuff, right?
Okay, everyone. Sorry, I need to part company earlier today.
Mhm.
So
Part
nice
company with
study,
the wicked
Marshall.
people.
Astaghfirullah. Unfortunately, I have
Mhm.
to take care of something.
Okay, mashallah.
Have a nice weekend, everyone. God bless
Thank
you
you.
all. Thank you, Salman, for the study.
Thank you, mashallah.
Mashallah, God bless.
So, God
Assalamu
willing, I'm
alaikum.
going to end the stream too, and we just need to find out who wants to lead the study next Wednesday, coming Wednesday, God willing. But I guess we'll find out because we'll see, inshallah. If, I think that it's already left. So thank you guys. Inshallah, our next study is going to be on 4:30 Pacific time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. It's not going to be at 6. Just so everybody knows, we changed the time. And God willing, we'll see you then. Assalamu alaikum.